Neuroscience of free will is the part of neurophilosophy that studies the interconnections between free will and neuroscience. As it has become possible to study the living brain, researchers have begun to watch decision-making processes at work. Findings could carry implications for our sense of agency and for moral responsibility and the role of consciousness in general. Relevant findings include the pioneering study by Benjamin Libet and its subsequent redesigns. These studies were able to detect activity related to a decision to move, and the activity appears to begin briefly before people become conscious of it. Other studies try to predict activity before overt action occurs. Taken together, these various findings show that at least some actions, like moving a finger, are initiated unconsciously at first, and enter consciousness afterward. In many senses the field remains highly controversial and there is no consensus among researchers about the significance of findings, their meaning, or what conclusions may be drawn. It has been suggested that consciousness mostly serves to cancel certain actions initiated by the unconscious, so its role in decision-making is experimentally investigated. Some thinkers, like Daniel Dennett or Alfred Meal, say it is important to explain that free will means many different things. Among these versions of free will, some are dualistic, some not. But a variety of conceptions of free will that matter to people are compatible with the evidence from neuroscience. Overview. The current work is in broad agreement with a general trend in neuroscience evolution. Although we may experience that our conscious decisions and thoughts cause our actions, these experiences are in fact based on readouts of brain activity in a network of brain areas that control voluntary action. It is clearly wrong to think of feeling of willing something as a prior intention, located at the very earliest moment of decision in an extended action chain. Rather, W seems to mark an intention in action, quite closely linked to action execution. Patrick Haggard discussing an in-depth experiment by Zach Fried. One significant finding of modern studies is that a person's brain seems to commit to certain decisions before the person becomes aware of having made them. Researchers have found delays of about half a second with contemporary brain scanning technology. Other scientists in 2008 were able to predict with 60% accuracy whether subjects would press a button with their left or right hand up to 10 seconds before the subjects became aware of having made that choice. These and other findings have led some scientists, like Patrick Haggard, to reject some forms of free will. To be clear, no single study would disprove all forms of free will. This is because the term free will can encapsulate different hypotheses, each of which must be considered in light of existing empirical evidence. There have been a number of problems regarding studies of free will. Particularly in earlier studies, research relied too much on the introspection of the participants. But introspective estimates of event timing were found to be inaccurate. Many brain activity measures have been insufficient and primitive as there is no good independent brain function measure of the conscious generation of intentions, choices, or decisions. The conclusions drawn from measurements that have been made are debatable too, as they don't necessarily tell, for example, what a sudden dip in the readings is representing. Some of the research mentioned here has gotten more advanced. However, even recording individual neurons in conscious volunteers, researcher Zach Fried says that available studies do at least suggest consciousness comes in a later stage of decision-making than previously expected, challenging any versions of free will, where intention occurs at the beginning of the human decision process. Free will is illusion. It is quite likely that a large range of cognitive operations are necessary to freely press a button. Research at least suggests that our conscious self does not initiate all behavior. Instead, the conscious self is somehow alerted to a given behavior that the rest of the brain and body are already planning and performing. These findings do not forbid conscious experience from playing some moderating role, although it is also possible that some form of unconscious process is what is causing modification in our behavioral response. Unconscious processes may play a larger role in behavior than previously thought. It may be possible, then, that our intuitions about the role of our conscious intentions have led us astray. It may be the case that we have confused correlation with causation by believing that conscious awareness necessarily causes the body's movement. This possibility is bolstered by findings in neurostimulation, brain damage, but also research into introspection illusions. Such illusions show that humans do not have full access to various internal processes. The discovery that humans possess a determined will would have implications for moral responsibility. Neuroscientist and author Sam Harris believes that we are mistaken in believing the intuitive idea that intention initiates actions. In fact, Harris is even critical of the idea that free will is intuitive. He says careful introspection can cast doubt on free will. Harris argues, thoughts simply arise in the brain. What else could they do? The truth about us is even stranger than we may suppose. The illusion of free will is itself an illusion. Philosopher Walter Jackson Freeman III nevertheless talks about the power of even unconscious systems and actions to change the world according to our intentions. He writes, our intentional actions continually flow into the world, changing the world and the relations of our bodies to it. This dynamic system is the self in each of us. It is the agency in charge, not our awareness, which is constantly trying to keep up with what we do. To Freeman, the power of intention in action can be independent of awareness. Disputed relevance of scientific research. Some thinkers like neuroscientist and philosopher Adina Roskies think these studies can still only show, unsurprisingly, that physical factors in the brain are involved before decision-making. In contrast, Haggard believes that we feel we choose but we don't. Researcher John Dylan Haynes adds, how can I call a will mine if I don't even know when it occurred and what it has decided to do? Philosophers Walter Glannon and Alfred Meal think some scientists are getting the science right, but misrepresenting modern philosophers. This is mainly because free will can mean many things. It is unclear what someone means when they say free will does not exist. Meal and Glannon say that the available research is more evidence against any dualistic notions of free will, but that is an easy target for neuroscientists to knock down. Meal says that most discussions of free will are now had in materialistic terms. In these cases, free will means something more like not coerce, or that the person could have done otherwise at the last moment. The existence of these types of free will is debatable. Meal agrees, however, that science will continue to reveal critical details about what goes on in the brain during decision-making. Some senses of free will are compatible with what we are learning from science. If only that was what scientists were telling people. But scientists, especially in the last few years, have been on a rampage, writing ill-considered public pronouncements about free will which verge on social irresponsibility. Daniel Dennett discussing science and free will. This issue may be controversial for good reason. There is evidence to suggest that people normally associate a belief in free will with their ability to affect their lives. Philosopher Daniel Dennett, author of Elbow Room and a supporter of deterministic free will, believes scientists risk making a serious mistake. He says that there are types of free will that are incompatible with modern science, but he says those kinds of free will are not worth wanting. Other types of free will are pivotal to people's sense of responsibility and purpose, and many of these types are actually compatible with modern science. The other studies described below have only just begun to shed light on the role that consciousness plays in actions, and it is too early to draw very strong conclusions about certain kinds of free will. It is worth noting that such experiments, so far, have dealt only with free will decisions made in short time frames and may not have direct bearing on free will decisions made by the subject over the course of many seconds, minutes, hours or longer. Scientists have also only so far studied extremely simple behaviors. Adina Roskies points out 5 areas of neuroscientific research. 1. Action initiation. 2. Intention. 3. Decision. 4. Inhibition and control. And 5. The phenomenology of agency. And for each of these areas, Roskies concludes that the science may be developing our understanding of volition or will, but it yet offers nothing for developing the free part of the free will discussion. There is also the question of the influence of such interpretations in people's behavior. In 2008, psychologists Kathleen Vohs and Jonathan Schooler published a study on how people behave when they are prompted to think that determinism is true. They asked their subjects to read one of 2 passages, one suggesting that behavior boils down to environmental or genetic factors not under personal control, the other neutral about what influences behavior. The participants then did a few math problems on a computer, but just before the test started, they were informed that because of a glitch in the computer it occasionally displayed the answer by accident. If this happened, they were to click it away without looking. Those who had read the deterministic message were more likely to cheat on the test. Perhaps, denying free will simply provides the ultimate excuse to behave as one likes, Vohs and Schooler suggested.